Welcome to Rebel Spirit Radio, exploring the frontiers of spirituality, consciousness, the esoteric, and humanity's sacred relationship with the living earth. I'm your host, Nick Mather, and in this episode, I speak with Stéphane Allix, founder of the Research Institute of Extraordinary Experiences in France and author of When I Was Someone Else. Stéphane spent 2 decades as an investigative journalist and war correspondent before turning his attention to exploring the science of consciousness. When I Was Someone Else tells the amazing, true story of an investigation prompted by a waking dream Stéphane had while on a spiritual retreat in Peru that would eventually reveal a past life connection with a German soldier. Stéphane Allix is an investigative reporter and former war correspondent. He directed and moderated the French TV series Extraordinary Inquiries and founded INRIS, the Research Institute on Extraordinary Experiences. He is the author of several books, 2 of which have been translated into English: The Test, Incredible Proof of the Afterlife, and When I Was Someone Else, which is the topic of today's conversation. Stéphane, welcome to Rebel Spirit Radio.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you now.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. And first, I wanted to congratulate you on your book, When I Was Someone Else. I know it was originally published, I think, in 2017, but
yes.
The English translation just came out earlier this year. And I have to say, it was a very enjoyable read.
Thank you.
It's like a detective novel in many ways, and also like a war novel in some aspects. And I don't know if there's a comparable French phrase, but here we'd call it a real page turner.
Whoa, thank you.
Yeah.
It's all true. I mean, it's not a novel. It's all true.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes it so fascinating, is the truth to it. So I provided a bit of a biography on you, but I thought I would ask you if you could provide some more background. You've been on a very interesting life journey. You began as a war correspondent, and now you're doing something very different. And I was wondering if you could share some of your story.
Yes, of course, with pleasure. Basically, I'm a journalist since 33 something years. And this period is divided in 2 parts. The first part, from when I was 19 until 32, I was a journalist. I was doing war journalism, investigating journalism. Basically, I start when I went in Afghanistan in 1988, before the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I joined the Mujahideen, and I entered secretly with the Mujahideen, who was fighting the Russian at the time inside Afghanistan. And I spent months there. I was 19 at the time. And I absolutely wanted to become a journalist. I really wanted to become a war photographer. So there is 2 options to do that. Either you go to school and you learn how to become a journalist, or you just go on the field and you try to learn by yourself. I was very bad at school, so I decided to immediately take a plane ticket and to find out the first war nearby. And at the time it was Afghanistan. I also had a kind of family link with Afghanistan because my father used to travel there in the 50s as a geographer and as an explorer. So I had also kind of, this kind of link. So it was for me very easy to decide to go there. And this trip was one of the most important trips of my life because I spent months in the countryside with fighter who was fighting the Russian, and I shared their food, I shared their life. It was very, very tough. And I came back from Afghanistan. I was very different because I did experience war at a very young age. I mean, many young American soldiers had those experiences. But I was not a soldier. I was just unprepared, totally unprepared, untrained. But it also put the seed of journalism inside me. And from this moment, I really dedicate my entire life and time to try to learn this job, to learn this how to do photography, how to do war correspondent, war journalism. So I came back in France, and I went back to other country, and I tried to make a living out of that. It was difficult. I was obliged to have a side job, like a bookseller, like I even sold fish in a fish shop. I mean, I did a lot of job like that in order to be able to fly again away and to do journalism. And step by step, I learned, and step by step, I was able to live. I mean, to make a living from that. And I published my first book. I think it was in 23 years ago. It was a book about drug trafficking, because I became specialized on Asia, and most especially on Central Asia, which is Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Iran, and the Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, all this area. So this area also became the first producer of opium, from which you make heroin. So I became specialized on drug trafficking because of one of your American fellow journalists by the name of Larry Collins. Larry is, he's dead now, but he was a very famous journalist. He is the one who wrote Paris Burning, How Jerusalem. He was mixing novel writing to big investigation. And he was living partly in France. And at this time, it was 25 years ago, a French journalist of mine told me that Larry Collins was looking for someone who go for him in Afghanistan in the poppy field. And I didn't know anything about the subject, but I said, oh, that could be good. And I meet Larry Collins, and he just said to me, okay, if you want to go, I give you some money and you do this research for me. He just wanted to have some background information. And I came to work for him a couple of months, and it helps me to become familiar with this topic. So after a couple of years, I published my first book, and my first book was the story of my journey from a poppy field in Afghanistan through Central Asia, Caucasus, Eastern Europe, and then Europe, and to explain how drugs spread all over the world. And then, I thought to be long, but to make a long story short, I really was in love with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is so, it's today, especially in those days, in a very, very strange situation, but it's also a lovely country with a lot of lovely person there, and a lot of history. So in 2000, I decided to launch a big mission to investigate and to work on archaeological site of Afghanistan. It was during the Taliban regime at the time. The Taliban ruled Afghanistan the first time from 1986 to 2001. And in 2000, they were in command in Kabul. But I was familiar with some of their leaders, so I decided to fly there and to ask their authorization. And they allowed me to stay there, to stay in Afghanistan, not to do politics, but to go to see the archaeological site. What I didn't know it was that at the same time, some people in the movement, the hard ring branch of the movement, had taken the decision to blow away the Buddha of Bamiyan. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was in Afghanistan 2 giant Buddha statues, and the Taliban destroyed them in 2001, 6 months before 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my heart broke when I saw that. Yeah,
I was in Kabul at the time, and it was crazy. And I mentioned that because a couple of weeks after my brother died there in Afghanistan, I was working with my brother. I was directing a mission from the Explorer Society, French Explorer Society, and my brother and some other people were working for me there in Kabul. And one day, going south of Kabul to an archaeological site, we had a very stupid accident, and one of the car went out of the road, and all the 4 people in the car died. 2 of them were French, 2 others were Afghan. And among the French, they were my brother. So this was also a key moment of my life, as you can imagine, because suddenly everything stopped. Suddenly death came into my life with all the question you may have about that, the trauma, the emotion. And I fly back the body of my brother to France, and something changed from this moment. You know, when you are young, you may have a lot of existential question. What do we do on Earth? I mean, what's the purpose of life? And this is kind of those are kind of romantic questions. Then, when we go into life, when you start to work, you just forget those questions. But suddenly, in front of my dead brother, all those questions came back. Okay, I mean, if life can stop that quick, what's the purpose? Is there a reality to the spiritual realm? I mean, is this is just a belief, or can it be proven? So slowly after the death of my brother, I decided to switch and to still be journalist, because I only know to do that, asking questions. But instead of working on politics, I decided to working on science and consciousness science. And for the last 15 years, I'm working on that now, trying to explore not the outer world, but the inner world of consciousness. It's a very long answer for a short question. I'll try to make it shorter.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's you've got a fascinating story, like I said, and I was very interested in how you made that transition from a war correspondent to someone that seems to be on a spiritual kind of quest, and looking at these bigger questions.
The spiritual quest came as a kind of side effect, it's a proper word, from my investigation. Because when I start to question physicists or scientific researcher about consciousness, it was not spiritual questioning. It was more a journalist questioning. What do we know about the brain? What do we know about the relation between brain and consciousness? Is there a direct link? Do we have a proof that when brain stop functioning, consciousness also stop? Is it proven or not? I mean, what do we know about death? So I was really not willing to ask a priest or a rabbin or a monk. I wanted to ask a scientist. And doing my investigation on science, asking science to answer that question, I realized that the so-called certainty we live in, meaning, okay, there is an obvious link between the brain activity and consciousness. And then when brain stops functioning and brain is dead, there is no more consciousness. This is a belief. This is a materialistic belief. This is not a proven fact. So it was really mind-blowing for me, because I thought we live in a clever world. And if things are not proven, we don't believe in it like that. And I was realizing that it was the case. We are just kind of unbended in a materialistic worldview that we take for granted, but which is not based on scientific demonstration. So it was really mind-blowing, because suddenly it became possible for me to wonder where my brother could be. Maybe he's somewhere. Maybe he's not dead. I mean, his body is dead. His body is not there anymore, but maybe a part of him is still somewhere. I mean, nobody has proven me that it's not the case. So maybe I should prove that it's the case. And it's just a fascinating topic for a journalist. And the spiritual part came really long after that, through my inner experience. But at first, it was really a journalist investigation.
Yeah, very good. It's I know that there's a similar organization in California to the one that you founded in Reese. I think I always forget the title. It's the Noetic Institute. Yeah, Noetic Institute. And wasn't that Edgar Mitchell? That you told me before we began recording, you met him. I think he was responsible or connected to
he
Noetic
founded
Institute.
the astronaut Edgar Mitchell founded the Noetic
Right.
Institute, and he had the same. I had the chance of meeting him a couple of times, and he had the same kind of accident that I have. I mean, my accident was the death of my brother. His accident was coming back from the moon after months of preparation and very high tension. Suddenly, all the tension was just calming down, and he was just waiting to go back to on Earth. And he was looking out of the window, and he was looking at the sun and the moon. The Apollo capsule was rotating, so he was having this kind of dance of sun and moon and Earth all the time. And he had, during the return trip, he had a kind of what he understood was a spiritual experience. He suddenly became one with the cosmos. I mean, for this guy from Texas, with a physicist or physician, physicist background, he was not prepared to that. So he wanted to understand if science had something to say about this feeling of being connected with all the universe. So he went to be interested in quantum physics and some other field, and he decided to create the Noetic Institute, which still exists today and do a lot of great research. One of the main researcher there is Dean Radin, which is a friend of mine, and Dean is doing an amazing work on psi effect, on extrasensory perception. I mean, all those perceptions that prove that we are more than just a piece of flesh and bones. We are. There is something inside us that goes beyond space and time. That can go beyond space and time. Call it soul, spirit. I mean, give a name. It's not the purpose. The fact is that we can prove scientifically that there is something inside us that is not totally 100% dependent from our activity of the body, and we may survive that. That's mind blowing. I mean,
yeah.
And yes, when I had the chance of meeting several people at Noetic Institute and many great researchers you have in the US. I mean, there is so many great persons in the US who are working on consciousness, starting in the 70s, 60s, on near-death experience and some other experience. With psychedelic also, there is a lot of wonderful explorer. So I'm really receive a lot of inspiration from the work that have been done in California, but also in other places of the US. And I had the chance of meeting most of the major researchers in the US. Some of them are friends today. And even though I'm not speaking very good English, I have a kind of Pakistani accent. And I wanted to create something like that in France because it was missing. I mean, we don't have in France a big research institute, and also as a journalist, we don't have a place where we can find proper information on this kind of science. So I decided to create INRES in 2007. And the first objective was to bring together all mental health professionals who was interested in extraordinary experience, like near-death experience or like alien abduction. I mean, all those things that are happening in our life that are not supposed to happen, but they happen. Mm-hmm. So you have two options when someone is telling you such a story. Either, oh, he's crazy, I don't want to hear about that, or okay, I'm listening, and maybe he's full, maybe he's maybe something real happened to him, and I need to build up some kind of tool to work with it, to listen to it. And so I decided to create such an institute in France, and it was very successful because thousands of people came, and today we have a TV channel, a magazine. Unfortunately, it's only in French, but it was needed.
It's and I agree with you on that. I always say that I think that consciousness studies are going to be the next scientific revolution. So I think that the work you're doing and the work that they're doing at the Noetic Institute is so vital and important to understanding uh, what it means to be human and what it means to be alive and the nature of reality.
Mm.
Um,
But there is something that I still don't understand. It's we live in a strange world
mm,
where we give a lot of money and we pay a lot of attention to stupid things. And for people who do major research, they hardly get funded. I have a friend of mine in Arizona, in Tucson. Her name is Julie Bichel. She's doing research on mediumship.
mm,
She's one of the women who do the best research on earth about mediumship. She had a lot of difficulty to find funding to do her research, but her work is priceless because she bring a lot of evidence that people are able to talk to a dead person. I mean, she do an amazing and scientific research on that. So I advise to the people who are listening or discussion now, if they're interested in mediumship, to visit the website of Julie. It's Whitbridge Institute. She's doing an amazing work and she needs support. And I mean, I'm sorry
oh no.
to say that, but it's really worth to support because I mean, she's the one who bring the more strong evidence of life after death. And I mean, this is a great subject. I mean,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's worth to investigate.
Well, yeah, and it's something that is relevant to each and every one of us. And I'll share this. I was raised mostly with my grandparents, and my grandfather died relatively unexpectedly when I was 16.
Mm.
And he had been rushed to the hospital, and then they had to fly him to another hospital in another city. And the ambulance came to take him away. It was like 3:30 in the morning, and I was left home alone. And at probably about 6 in the morning or so, I decided, "Oh, I'm just going to go back, try to get a little bit more sleep," because I didn't know at that point what was going on. And I had a dream of I was standing in the backyard when I was a little kid. I would stand in a very certain spot in the backyard waiting for my grandfather to come home. And in this dream, I was standing in the spot that I would normally stand in when I was a little kid. And I saw my grandfather walk up to, he had this red Ford pickup truck. And he walked up to this truck in this dream and he stopped and he looked at me and he waved. And then he got in the truck and drove off.
Whoa.
And according to my calculations, that would have been right about the time that he died.
Whoa.
And no one can ever tell me that that wasn't my grandfather coming to say goodbye.
Wow.
And that I was just in the right state of consciousness to have that experience, to have that happen. So
Yeah.
I've always, believed ever since that moment that there was something else.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you to share
yeah,
that because
sure.
it's, I mean, I heard so many, such a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's not rare. I mean, it's
Right.
very common, but we thank you for you to share it now because it's important for everyone to share this. This is normal,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be so helpful and so important to share that during the grieving process
Mm-hmm.
because it opens a door. It opens something very important. It's reality, and no one can tell you it's just a dream or no one except you what you
Mm-hmm.
felt, and it's so important to yeah to see those experiences as they can be probably an evidence that yeah your grandfather would just say, oh, I have to go.
Yeah. Well, and dreams are really interesting. I think they are a source of information. And this is going to get us into your book a little bit, because the story begins, you were on a retreat in Peru, and you had what you call a waking dream. I was wondering if you could explain what this was.
Mhm. It was during a very special time of my life. I had decided to withdraw from different responsibility in France to came back to my personal work on my own consciousness investigation, because I was too much too much in a frantic time in between different activities. So I used to do some retreat time to times in Peru, in a shamanic retreat, which means I am isolated in the forest. Someone brings me food twice a day, and very, very special food, no salt, no sugar, no animals. And I am on a kind of diet where I used to eat every day one plant or two plants, what the shaman call a master plant. It's not a psychedelic plant. It's a kind of plant that may have the shaman says this plant have a spirit that teach you. This is the base of shamanic retreat in Amazonian shamanism. So I was there in my little cabin, little house in the forest. And during one day, I was there since maybe a little bit more than 1 week. I decided to take the plant again, which is not psychoactive, and to have a ear set and to play a dream sound like boom, 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 drum, boom, 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 to help me to do a shamanic journey. So I put the ear set on my ear, I lay down on my couch, and I eat the plant, and I close my eyes, and I basically let my imagination go away. And I was not sleeping. Basically, it's what you do during hypnosis or during a therapeutic session or rebirth or conscious dreaming. You just or psychoanalysis. You just let your mind speak. So my mind start imagining that I was a bird, I was flying. So I still have my eyes closed, and I saw myself flying above the forest. And it's a long vision, but the key point came where as I was flying the forest, I suddenly little black dot from above. And at first I thought, oh, maybe it's Indian from Amazonia. So I wanted to come closer. So I fly down. And as I fly down, I realized it was not Indian. I was not in Amazonia anymore. I was in a very white landscape. And the black dots was men. They were soldiers. They were soldiers from German army. They were SS, and they were fighting during World War II. And I was very surprised, because usually when your imagination is creating things, you are kind of expecting what's coming up. You know where your imagination goes, and you are always kind of anticipating what's coming next. In this case, I was totally surprised to realize and to be in this scene. I was in the Amazonian forest. Why I was imagining this scene of war, but I decided not to judge what I was seeing. I decided just to observe, to see what was happening. And among the soldiers, I saw this man in front of me. He was very close. It was maybe 1 meter from me. And I instantly knew his name was Alexander. And I instantly knew his rank in the military was Obersturmführer, which is in the German SS, the equivalent of lieutenant. And I saw this guy in front of me, was staring at me, and immediately he received a piece of shrapnel here, hitting him on the neck, and the blood came out, and he fell down and he died. And I was in shock, because there was a lot of energy, a lot of emotion. even though I was not thinking this is my imagination or what. I mean, I was shocked by the emotion and the intensity of the scene. And suddenly the scene started again. He was again standing back. He was again staring at me, receiving the shrapnel, falling down. I was in both situations. I was at the same time a kind of observer. He was in front of me. And at the same time, I was him. I was his body lying on the ground, on the white ground. And I was so shocked by the precision of the vision, by the intensity of the emotion, that I thought, what is his name? What is his name? And immediately I remember it in the left part of my vision. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense, but it was on the left part of my vision. I saw a kind of identity card with the name written on it, Hermann. So I knew his name was Alexander Hermann, and he was Obersturmführer. And I had some other vision, but the war scene of his death was the most important and intense scene of that vision. I saw another time a little girl with him. I didn't know if it was his daughter or what. I saw another man. And basically the vision, I could have stopped everything, just standing up, opened my eyes, and it was over. But I decided to let it go. But after 30 minutes, the track of the drumming stopped. So I came back in some way, and I opened my eyes, and I was in a state of awe. So I decided to write very precisely all the detail I had collected. And a little part of me thought at this time, could it be a real person? But I mean, it was too weird for me to even think of that. I was just feeling that, okay, I am in a special time of my life. I want to work on myself. I came especially in Peru to do that. I'm doing a kind of strange shamanic psychoanalyst experience. So maybe it's my unconscious that brings me just material to work on my relation with violence, my fascination for war that makes me becoming war correspondent, this violence inside me. Maybe it's a kind of a scenario that is brought by my unconscious for me to work on it. Really, as a journalist, I always choose the more obvious explanation in between two. So the most obvious explanation was this psychoanalyst explanation for me. So I stayed in Peru for some times, and I didn't have access to internet. But when I came back in France a couple of weeks after, I Googled the name. I mean, you would have do that. Everyone would have done that. So I Googled the name, Alexander Hermann, Obersturmführer. And I was not very surprised to find one. I didn't know, I don't remember a whole, but I came across a kind of list of, which looks like SS officer. It was written in Polish. And there was a lot of list of name. And in those lists, I find one, Obersturmführer Alexander Hermann. For me, it was a chance. Like if now I ask you to invent a German name with a rank, maybe we will probably find one in the list. I mean, there is so many lists, so many names. So it was curious, but I just put that story aside and I went back to my daily life without paying more attention to what did happen in Peru. I mean, in that respect. And 1 year passed, more than 1 year passed. And during that year, time to times, when I was receiving a healing or when I did a work with a friend of mine who is doing astrology, time to times, this German soldier came back. During a healing, for instance, as I was lying on the ground, I had again the same vision. And the funny thing is that the healer, without talking to me, had also the same vision of seeing me standing in the war zone. So it was kind of weird, but nothing too important to drive me to start an investigation, because for me it was just a chance that a real Alexander Hermann did exist. But for some reason, more than 1 year after that, I decided to start again an investigation. I start again to Google the name, and I don't know why I did that. But as I was Googling the name, I find the same list, I find the same website, and I was very, very careful because, when you start Googling things related to Nazi regime, you may find very not nice website. You see what I mean? So I was very careful about where I was searching, and finally I find a name of someone in France who seems to be an historian, who was specialist of German army, and I decided to call him. So I call him, I found his phone number, I call him, and by chance he knew my name because as you told, I was also a TV producer, so I appears on television. So he knew my work, and when I told him I was in Peru last year and I had a daydream where this scene appears to me and his name, everyone would have just hung up the phone. But since he knew me and he knew I was a serious journalist, he was curious, and his first advice was to say, but did you search a military file from this guy? And I didn't know that there were military file available for just a lieutenant, maybe a general or someone famous. You may find information, but for a lieutenant, I didn't know that. So he told me yes. The SS and the Nazi, they were having a lot of file for everything. So those archives are in Berlin, but there is also a copy in Washington. And if you want, I can put you in touch with a French historian who is doing research today in Washington. So I took the email, I wrote to this guy, and after a couple of hours, the French researcher answered to me and said, yes, I find a file, about maybe 80 page, for this Alexander Hermann, Obersturmführer. So I was very, very curious and very impatient to discover this file, and it takes him a couple of days to make a copy. And he sent me the file one morning. I receive and I download all this page, and I don't speak German, so for me it was very complicated to understand every single sentence. I didn't know what to search. I didn't know what to look for. So I started to Google Translate some page, and I understood that this guy was born in this city in the east of Germany, and he entered the SS. And I hardly understood what I was having in front of me. But I also sent the file to this historian who did help me. And very late that night, he sent me an email telling me I translate the basic information of this file, so I share it with you. This Alexander Hermann served in the Totenkopf division, which was a military division from the SS, and he went in France during the French invasion. He went also in Czechoslovakia, in Poland, and he participated in the Russian invasion from the German army in 1941, and he died there in October 41 in the little village. I'll give me a few details, from a wound on the neck. When I read that, it was like a truck just drove on me. I was really in shock, because suddenly it was not possible anymore that it was just by chance that I had found this name. The name, the surname, the rank in the SS, okay, it could be a chance, but the cause of death. So I immediately opened the file. I immediately tried to find the page he was mentioning. It was a death certificate. So I found out the death certificate and I read it. I copied the sentence in German in Google Translate, and it was saying that the real Alexander Hermann, the real Obersturmführer Alexander Hermann, died from a wound on the neck. And this was mind-blowing because wow, it was not coming up from my imagination. It's not possible. That coincidence, it's not possible anymore. It's this guy really exists. How can I explain that I saw what happened to this man? And And from this very moment, I decided to start an investigation and to do everything that I could to understand the link I had with this man and why I had this experience. What was the relation with me? And I mean, it was the entire story start there.
Incredibly fascinating. And I have so many questions. But one that I wanted to ask pretty quickly, though, was that this initial vision or waking dream came to you when you were listening to shamanic drumming. Did you ever try to go back into or recapture this waking dream? You said once, I think you were working with a healer where you experienced it again, but did you ever intentionally try to capture it again?
No, because I don't trust myself.
Oh, okay.
I don't trust my subjectivity. And I'm working with a lot of psychotherapists and people who do hypnosis, for instance, or other altered state of consciousness. And I know that trying to investigate, for example, a memory is a very, very tricky exercise because, for example, under hypnosis, you are not accessing untouched file inside your brain. Your brain is not a computer. As soon as you start to recover memory from the past, you are also taking the risk of building this memory or rebuilding a memory. You don't know what is real, what is half real, what is just a reconstruction, what is a kind of projection from your unconscious to you don't know. So at this moment, I didn't trust myself enough to be able to have a clear distinction in between what I would produce from my own imagination that I would access from, from another reality. So I only wanted to rely on a rational tool, archive. I had this military file to start with. Soon after, I realized that there was another file available, which was the file from his wedding, because when you were in the SS and if you wanted to get married, you needed to have an investigation done on you to prove that you were racially pure for 3 or 4 generations. So it was a huge investigation file where I find a picture of him. And then I also knew that I needed to go to Germany to find out maybe family, maybe this little girl, who is she? Is his daughter? Is she living somewhere? If the name, the surname, the rank, the cause of death are real, maybe the other part of my vision, which this little girl, this other man, maybe they are real also. So I had a lot of direction to start investigation. And at that stage, I really wanted to be very careful and to avoid to add more difficulty in adding unsure information that would come from a sources that I cannot be sure of. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Oh, I do. One of the things that I really appreciated about the book was that there were times as you go into this investigation and you're exploring and going to Germany and you end up, visiting Russia and whatnot, that there are a lot of synchronicities that happen and intuitions. And what I really appreciated was that with the intuitions, you always verified. It wasn't just, I just feel like this happened. But it was, I have this reaction and let's investigate this and see what I can demonstrate out of it. And I felt that was really important and gives a legitimacy to the story that you're telling.
But for me, intuition, it's also what we call sixth sense. It's a reality. It's not magic. So you need to understand how it works. It's a human capacity, but as all human capacity, you need to train, you need to verify, you need to become familiar with it. If you want to play the piano, you need years to be able to play nice sonata of Chopin. It doesn't come like that. It's the same with intuition. So to play the piano, you need to practice, you need to make a mistake, you need to understand how it works and to become more and more familiar with your finger and everything. For intuition, it's the same. You may have an inch once, but what does it make in your body? What does this inch makes in your stomach or in your brain? Was it an emotion associated with it? Was it a feeling? Was it a thought? I mean, you need to understand how this intuition arose inside you to dissociate it from your fear, your expectation, your desire, your normal human production. It takes time. It takes time. And the best way to practice and to become familiar is to test you every time. I mean, as much as you can. So, I mean, I'm totally open to the possibility and to the reality of this intuition. It doesn't mean that I believe in everything that comes in my mind. I need to check everything, like all subjective feeling you may have. You may fall in love with someone walking in the street like that, but is it love, or is it just desire, or is it just sexual attirance? Or I mean, you need to know yourself to know why things are emerging from deep inside of you. You need to know yourself. And I'm 53, but I still don't know myself fully. And to test intuition, it's the best way to make them happen more and more, and to learn how to trust them more and more.
At what point did you start thinking that this connection that you had with Alexander might have something to do with reincarnation? And I also wanted to ask you about the way that you seem to think about reincarnation in the book, because it doesn't seem that you're saying, oh, well, there was this person, Alexander, who was this complete maybe entity or something. And then all of a sudden there's Stéphane, and it's the same person, just wearing different clothes, as it were. But it seems that you argue that there's something else, that maybe that you're both part of something bigger.
Yes, but at first I wanted to understand the link I had with this guy, why I had this vision in Peru, why I had this hypothesis of reincarnation coming quickly. It's because suddenly I realized how a life of such man could resonate with my life today. I don't share any of the belief of the Nazi. I want to make clear of that. I mean, it's clear in the book, but I want to make clear now as we discuss. For me, it's absolutely disgusting regime. It's just the most awful regime we may have on Earth since millions of years. What they did, okay. So I didn't feel comfortable with it, but I realized that I always been obsessed with violence and war. Even when I was young teenager, when I was 17, 18, I wanted to become war correspondent very quickly. I mean, why? Why this desire of going on the front line? And what I wanted to experience was the fear of the fighting. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see the people there. I wanted to see how they can do that. I wanted to see in their eyes. And beside of war, I also wanted to understand the evil evil. I wanted to understand why people could do that. It was not for me a philosophical question. I wanted to, when I started to think of becoming war correspondent, I was just fascinated by Vietnam War and all this generation of photographers who worked there from the 65, 67 to the end of the war, 75. And after that, there was this war in Cambodia, and with the Khmer Rouge, who was one of the craziest regime in the world also. And the leader of the Khmer Rouge was called Pol Pot. And at the time, he was still alive. He was still hiding somewhere in Cambodia. And one of my ideas was to go there to try to meet him, because I was not fascinated by him. I did not admire this person, but I wanted to see such a man in the eyes. Like if I would have wanted to see Hitler in the eyes. How can you do such a things as a human beings? I mean, how a normal baby, when he grew up, became such a monster. This was an obsession when I was young. So suddenly, when I had this experience with Alexander Herman, everything came back in my mind. And I make my entire life today as a Stéphane Allix to investigate the question of violence, of evil, of meaning of life. It could have been the question that Alexander was confronted to, but he didn't have time, or he didn't have the opportunity or the consciousness to investigate during his life. I mean, this is my interpretation today, but I didn't meet in the Amazonian forest a Danish princess or a Filipino fisherman, which I didn't have anything to resonate with. I meet someone who immediately resonated with my entire life today as Stefan. So there was a kind of familiarity, there was a kind of proximity with this man. And today also, I see it this way. My life as a journalist today was made, and especially at the beginning, like if I wanted to do the exact opposite Alexander did. He stopped thinking by himself very quickly when he joined the Hitler Jugend. He stopped thinking definitely by himself when he entered the SS very young. He became just a part of a regime, a part of a ideological army. He was not anymore by himself. He was just like a hunt among thousands of other ants of the devil. I myself, I was bad at school because I hate that people were explaining what I should think of. So I quit school very quickly. I all wanted to think by myself. I all wanted to do by myself. I never went to university. I all learned by myself. And as a journalist, when I wanted to go to war, and when I went to war in Afghanistan when I was 19, I didn't wanted to fight myself. I didn't wanted to hold a gun. The Mujahideen give me a Kalashnikov just to take a picture and to be the guy with the Kalash, but I didn't wanted to kill anyone. I didn't wanted to participate in that. I wanted to be aside and to witness and to understand. So, yeah, very, very naturally, the question of could Alexander be my past life, became one of the major line of investigation that I follow. And to come to your second question, I didn't wanted to do a formal investigation. What do we know about reincarnation in the text? I wanted to see what was happening in my body. I had this obvious link with Alexander, and the weeks after weeks of my investigation, it became more and more obvious that it could be considered as my previous life. but I am me. I am not Alexander. He was a guy, and I am another guy. So what's the link between us? How come a soul jumped from him to me? I mean, we are so different. How we could explain that? So I cannot go into detail because it's still even today in process. But I think we have a very, very narrow view of what could be reincarnation. And during this time, I don't remember if I put it in the book, but I remember a phrase that was given to me by a Tibetan monk year before, who this Tibetan monk, he was a Rinpoche, he explained to me the reincarnation, and he told me, you know, reincarnation is not a redo, a re-you. When you're reborn, you are not you again. When you're reborn, you are someone else. You are another person, another human being, another brain, another flesh, another face, another sex, maybe. You are not anymore the individuality. It's what disappears with death. The personality disappears with death. Maybe it can left some emotions, some biographical element. I don't know what's left. I mean, I just leave it to philosopher this question. There is obviously a kind of link. The Buddhists call it consciousness continuum, but they don't define consciousness. The Buddhists, they don't say this is something. They don't believe in soul, for instance, the Buddhists. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what is. You know, this is my own little interpretation today. But I believe we are. I believe what's common in between me and Alexander is what we call the let's call it soul. But soul is not Stéphane. Soul is not Alexander. Soul is pure love, pure energy, pure light, pure something. And for some reason that I don't know, that are just beyond my understanding, sometimes soul projects itself on Earth, on this planet, and it creates a little being of flesh and bone, and this being is born from a womb, and by the name of Stéphane, and the Stéphane has his entire life, and then he will die, and then the link between the soul and Stéphane kind of fade away, disappear, but then the soul send another light on in time and space and create another man. I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit confused, maybe, and I'm not very clear. I'm sorry for the people who are listening, but I try myself to understand also what could it be, and it takes me 400 pages to try to figure out what was the link and how I could explain reincarnation through my own experience.
Yeah, and I don't think that you should feel the responsibility of having to try to explain
Thank
reincarnation.
you.
And
I would advise to be very, very careful and to be careful with people who brings you all the answer.
Yes. Personally in my life right now, I'm trying to just embrace uncertainty about most things and avoid thinking or saying that I have knowledge about pretty much anything, and just to be open and inquisitive. So I know that we're getting very close to the end here. I did want to ask one final thing, well, two actually, if you don't mind. And one you sort of touched on in terms of this relationship with Alexander. And I found this so important and very moving. You mentioned several times in the book that the conditions that gave rise to Nazi Germany are still with us. And both in Europe and in the US. And you said that you wrote that we all carry the horror of World War II in us. And I found it very moving at one point. As you said, you're not a Nazi. You find, the SS abhorrent, and you fully admit that Alexander probably committed atrocities. But yet, and you never turn away from that, but you come to care about this man. And I think you ask this very important question that I think it's important, on an individual, but a collective level. And it's this question of, how do you love what you detest in yourself?
If you don't love it, it will destroy you. At first, I also wanted to understand how millions of young Germans became so fascinated by Hitler, who was basically not very intelligent. I mean, it's very bizarre to explain how people who were not that clever, like Hitler, Himmler, and the little group around him, became so much important and get the power. So I wanted to understand how a young German, basically intelligent, became SS. And I just read a lot of social studies, and you find everywhere the same answer. I mean, there is a lot of frustration coming from the First War, the First World War. There is a lot of there is a poverty, there is a populism, there is an economical crisis in the Germany in the 20s, and all those elements are making the world in crisis. And when you are in crisis, either in the world outside or inside you, you want easy answer. I mean, because you are fragile, you are afraid, you don't want to think too much, you just want to be calm and secure. And if someone said, oh, if you want to be secure, you need to kill all those guys because it's because of all those guys that you're not secure, or maybe to build a wall somewhere, or to create, I mean, the problem is outside of you. I will take care of the problem, don't worry. Everybody wants that. So we see that every election, it will be soon presidential election in France in the coming months. I'm sure we will have such a person who will have the solution for everything. And sometimes the people who have solution for everything are dangerous, very dangerous. Fortunately, today in the US or in Europe, we have democracy for quite long, and democracy is strong enough to avoid being totally destroyed by such a person. We have seen it. But in Germany in the 20s, democracy was very, very young, and it was just blown away by the power of Hitler, who just say, you're frustrated, you're sad, you want to be proud of being German, you want to be, okay, we will do it again, but we need to kill those person, we need to regain our strength, we need to regain our territory, and we will do that, and I am the guy. And I think Alexander, when he entered the Hitlerjugend in 1930s, and when he entered the SS in 1933, he didn't plan to participate in Holocaust. I mean, like the vast majority of German, of Nazi, they didn't plan that. I mean, they didn't like Jew for many, many reasons, but there is a lot of people who don't like Jew all over the world. Unfortunately, we even see that today. I mean, how comes those ideas still exist? But it still exists. But step by step, you are in a kind of circle that feed himself, and it starts very in a very acceptable situation, but step by step, you're obliged to do things that I read a lot of biography of SS and a lot of biography of people who have been in the camp as SS personnel, and it's not psychopath. It's not people who even we have published a lot of book about the Eichmann trial, and Eichmann was a normal guy. It's the title of the book of the philosopher Hannah Arendt. Eichmann was not different from millions of other persons. He was just in a situation where he was able to develop his own pulsion, his own you see what I mean? And yes, history can bring back that kind of person. We need to be careful about that. We need to be careful. But also, it's also what's interesting me. I address in the book the question of the social organization of the world, but I also address in the book the question of your own behavior and your own awareness of this process inside you. We all have wounds. You, me, people who are listening. Those wounds come from the childhood, come from many sources. Sometimes those wounds can develop a shadow part inside of us, made of fear or thinking, or we basically control it all over the life. But maybe one day something happened and suddenly everything explodes. And we realize that we're not free because there is one ghost inside of us. That ghost built up by our denial, by our weakness. And this ghost take control over us. So this is the reason why I'm trying day by day to try to bring light inside of me, to investigate all the little shadow part, because I don't want to be the how you call it, marionette, puppet. Mm-hmm. What is the expression?
Puppet or marionette, either one I think will work.
Of my fear, my inner fear. So I think we all are. I love one writer, an American writer who is a philosopher by the name of Karl Marlantes. He was a Marine during the Vietnam War. He studied at Yale, and for some reason he decided to go to Vietnam also as a Marine, and he did two tours there. So he had the experience of fighting, but he had also the brain to question why he was having this experience, and he wrote a book. I think it's why the men go at war. I'm sorry for the title. Anyway, this guy said, you don't know how you will behave in a war zone. If you believe you will never do atrocity, you are in danger because you don't know yourself. Maybe you won't do it, but maybe you will do it. Maybe you are capable of things you don't believe you could do. So we need to be conscious of that, and we need to be aware that there's a lot of light inside us, but there's also a lot of shadow. And if we don't want to consider the shadow inside of us, we are in danger of being overwhelmed one day in our life. And it's what I'm telling in the book, and it's why also I wanted to write this book.
Yeah, and it comes across that way in that it's a healing journey. It's a healing journey for you, and it seems like it was a healing journey for Alexander, and a healing journey for the greater world.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre because I had the feeling of that I was holding a wound from Alexander. I was holding a legacy from him. But I also had the feeling that he is living somewhere in the spirit world, facing his own problem. like we were two different persons. But I think my work, my investigation, helps me to dissociate inside of me myself from the legacy I was having from him, legacy of fear, sadness, guilt. Suddenly I understood that guilt, that sadness, that violence I had in me, it was not me, it was from him. So it helps me to dissociate that and to become more myself today. And I think also my work helps him to understand what he did, and to understand that he was overwhelmed during his entire life by his shadow. Because when he born, when he was 1, 2, as all the kids, he was a nice kid.
So you have a
So
picture of him as a child in the book, and
yeah,
he seems to be very happy and joyful.
yeah, and I came across several pictures of him when he was young. I don't say all the detail because it's an amazing story. And I found one picture of him with his brother playing in the backyard of their house in Plauen, East Germany. And the funny thing is that I was there and I took a picture of this backyard, which is exactly the same stone, exactly the same appearance. Like nothing has changed in more than nearly 90 years. And it's strange. I mean, we live in the time, on a timeline where past is very past and the future doesn't exist yet, and we are stuck in the present. But this investigation allowed me to experience that time is a kind of illusion. Sometimes I had the feeling that Alexander's time was there. I remember a couple of times in Germany, I was having my lunch in a restaurant in some place of Germany, and suddenly I had the feeling of the time of World War II was there, present at the same space. I don't know how to describe that very precisely, but um, I think we're living in a very narrow narrow part of the reality, and what I experience when it comes to sixth sense, to intuition, to spirit, to the help I receive from synchronicity and everything. This investigation also helps me to pay more attention to this other parts of reality that are not measurable, but that are part of our reality. I'm sorry, I have a lot of things to say, but I hardly found the right word in English. I hope
that's okay.
you don't mind too much.
No, you're doing perfect, and your English is way better than what my French would ever be.
Thank you.
So, I know that we're nearly out of time here, and I wanted to be respectful of your time. So to end, I do want to encourage people to read the book. I tried to avoid getting into too many details because I do encourage people to read it. I think that everyone would enjoy it. But let me ask you, what's next for you?
I'm still working on this. I think we live in a world with a veil in front of our eyes, because we need this veil to function in this world, this materialistic world, this time and space. But I'm trying to connect as much as I can with the soul part inside of me, because it's where the answers are. It's where the peace is. During those days, Afghanistan is going through a very difficult time again. The Taliban are taking all the country again. I received some message from people I know in Kabul who ask for help, and it's difficult to see that after 20 years of effort, of money, we came back at exactly the same point of violence and war. And I think to stop being overwhelmed by confusion and violence, both in the world but also inside ourselves, we need to find out every day a way to reconnect with this soul, to try to understand why we behave the way we behave, why we are stressed by a situation, why this person in our family is making us nervous, why we are not able to succeed in something we're trying to do. There is no one God who decide that you should be gifted or you should be punished. It's only us who could understand deeply who we are and what is driving us out of our consciousness. And so I'm trying every day to work on that. The psychedelic research and the shamanic technique allow to do a very amazing exploration of this inner world that give access to the outer reality. So I'm working in that direction, and it's still bringing a lot of surprise. Mm-hmm. But I want to be able to, I had a friend of mine who was close from a Quaker movement in the US, and he told me, the Quaker have this sentence: we want to find the that of God in every person. I want to find the that of God in every person, even my worst enemy, because my worst enemy had the that of God. And if we all together, we do the same quest of trying to find the that of God, this world will be just wonderful. It's just belong to us to do it. Yeah. So let's do it.
Yeah, it's the great work, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I could spend quite a bit more time speaking with you. I thoroughly enjoyed this. And one more time, I do want to encourage everyone to pick up a copy of your book. And I do not think that they would regret it 1 second.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on episode 9 of Rebel Spirit Radio. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to give it a positive review on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. Your reviews really do help. And please consider subscribing. For those viewing on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so that you'll be informed when I upload new content. For the time being, I'll be releasing episodes every other week, with the goal of releasing them every week in the near future. I'm also working on creating additional video content for the YouTube channel, including book reviews, educational videos on topics concerning spirituality, the history of religion, and the religious response to the climate crisis. If you would like to support my work in creating free and credible material on YouTube, please consider making a one-time donation via PayPal. You can find a link in the video description or show notes. Your support makes this podcast possible. I'm Nick Mather, and you've been listening to Rebel Spirit Radio. Until next time, may you be in peace and flourish in all possible ways.